Morning, everyone. This is the Town of Fairfield's Economic Development Commission meeting of July 7th, our regularly scheduled July meeting. We're meeting both in the Old Town Hall Conference Room and via Zoom. We have in the room today Chairman Lesko, Commissioner Beck, our guest speaker, Planning Director Jim Wendt, and Gretchen Gerthner, our recording secretary. Online, we have Commissioners Rosado, Rappaport, Hockhauser, and Colburn. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community Economic Development, also in person in the Old Town Hall Conference Room. And with that, I'll turn things over to you, Mr. Chairman, for your welcome and introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mark. And welcome, everyone. Hope it was a great 4th of July for everyone. And thank you for being here today. We actually have a real call it a treat, because it's always nice to have Jim Wendt here to go through some of the more pressing and interesting developments within the town from a very technical standpoint. So I don't want to take much time. So with that, I'm going to hand it right back to Mark, and let's move it right along today.
Okay, so we have item 3, the minutes of the June 2nd regular meeting, as well as our June 22nd special meeting. I have copies here, but obviously those of you online hopefully received them as part of the meeting announcement and agenda packet. But is there a motion to consider and approve them?
All right, in a second. Okay, and all in favor? Excellent. Okay, that's so moved. Thank you. And updates on the plans for conservation and development?
So I asked Jim to join us today. As all of you probably know, Jim is our planning director. We've recently retained FHI Fitzgerald Halliday, who we worked with previously, to assist staff in completing, and the commission in completing, our update to our plan of conservation development. They've begun work. 2 of the main areas that they're focused on in completing are concerning economic development and housing. The Affordable Housing Committee just completed an update to the town's affordable housing plan in compliance with Connecticut general statutes. It requires an update every 5 years. But I thought it would be helpful to get an update from Jim as terms of the schedule and ways in which this commission can play a role in those deliberations. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Mr. Wendt.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys this morning. You guys at home or wherever you may be, hear me okay over there, I hope. Some of you may recall and have participated with us in the winter of 2020, right before the COVID shutdown. We had 3 very successful and well-attended workshop meetings to kick off our POCD effort. We had, at that time, we had tabletop discussions regarding conservation, economic development, housing, and infrastructure. Some of the key things we heard from those meetings, and should not be a stranger to you folks, because I'm sure you've heard the same things and have said the same things, is that we should be looking for opportunity to increase density of development downtown. And of course, the one of the key things there is balancing that against our infrastructure capabilities. We are now, knowing that we are up against some sewer capacity issues downtown and some drainage infrastructure that we need to sort out. Developing design standards was an important feedback that we got. I think people feel that how a development looks and feels is more important than the actual number of units or technical specifications. Does it look right? Does it feel right? Does it look right for the community? There were some mixed reviews. We floated out the idea, just for discussion purposes, about potential air rights development over the downtown train station. That got mixed reviews. Some thought it was a good idea. Some thought it was too much in that location, given all the traffic burdens that that location has in the morning time and in the afternoon with schools. There was general consensus that A mixed-use opportunity might be the right way to go for the Exide property. And generally expanding residential opportunities downtown is you know that you partnered with the Planning and Zoning Commission on our transit-oriented development plan, and that recommends expanding residential opportunities downtown, and we're exploring the best ways to do that. As Mark said, we've partnered now with FHI Studio. We're excited to have them on board. When we did the vetting for firms that responded to our RFP, FHI was right there on the same page with us, and that they identified 3 issues that really should be paramount in this discussion. 1 being issues around transit-oriented development, 2 being targeting and maintaining commercial opportunities, and 3, examining housing issues. Now, those are very much compressed into intertwined issues, because what we've learned together through our TOD planning efforts and from our own experiences, we've seen that large-scale residential development is in fact commercial economic development. The 3 projects, fairly recent projects, Trademark, Alto, and Anchorage, combined paid $2.27 million in taxes, which is more than GE paid. So those 3, 350 units with very few school kids, not a huge draw on town services, pay more money than we ever got, on an annual basis from GE. So that perspective, I think, gets lost a little bit when people talk about rental housing or dense housing. And again, I think, at least from my perspective, you may differ, is how a project looks and feels, I think, is more important than the actual number of units. But what that study, what that consulting team really helped hammer home to the Planning and Zoning Commission, at least, is that large-scale residential development is, in fact, behaves and is very much commercial economic development. So we've had some initial meetings with our consultants. The game plan going forward is we are going to have a conversation around the topic of resiliency first, and that is scheduled to take place with the Commission and the Flood and Erosion Control Board on the 18th of July. The idea there is to get some underlying strategies around perhaps there are areas where we should not be investing, and identify areas where it might be more appropriate for us to be investing on an environmental and resiliency basis. And then once we have that underpinning, we can go out and then talk about those issues that we identified earlier. The first, since it's been a little while since we've had any kind of meaningful public engagement, we are going to do a virtual workshop that we are hoping to roll out in either later at the end of this month or early August. It's going to be a 2-week window in which there will be a kind of a workshop product that you can log into. It's going to be an interactive experience, asking questions with some mapping exercises that people can do individually, and we're hoping that feedback will help solidify some of what we already think are the goals and strategies we should be looking towards, but we expect to get some good feedback from that. And then once we have that, we can then go out and do some get back into the in-person engagement, which we were hoping to do in the fall, again, around housing and economic development. So before we go out publicly with what we think might be some strategies we want to test the water with, we'd be interested to know, from this board's perspective, as an important, economic development being a key piece, as we all know, there's always that tension between increasing the grand list versus overdevelopment, and what's the right sweet spot, where should we be looking for investment opportunity, and where should we not? I think we recognize, and our consulting team recognizes, that in general, if you look at the entire geography of the town, we're not looking to change dramatically a very big percentage of our landscape. There's this board knows, our commercial zoning is only roughly 5% of our town's footprint. We have well-developed residential neighborhoods that I don't think anybody wants to see change dramatically, nor are we suggesting they should. The question is, where should we be focusing investment opportunity, and what should that look like? So we, we had a phone call, check-in call yesterday, and I discussed that I was gonna be with you folks this morning, and we thought it would be a good opportunity, and not necessarily to answer today, but before the fall, are there any specific goals or topics that you folks might have in your planning that you've done in your, strategic economic plan that was 2017, 2018 maybe, or things that you might have been talking about that are hot topics for this board that you would like to see us dig into a little deeper? What are important issues for this board that you think should be included in this POCD effort? In if you think there's something that needs some public vetting as part of this process, we'd be happy to have, give you guys a bit of an inside track to if there's something that you'd like us to build into, the process to see if, to test public input on. So that's kind of what we'd like to hear from you guys going forward in the next, month or so. If you've got anything you'd love to share today, I'm happy to have that conversation, but we'd like to challenge you guys a little bit to be part of the direction, at least from an economic development standpoint, if there's key topics or issues that you think are important to be part of the discussion.
I'd like to make a couple of comments and then open it up for other people to maybe continue those comments. Jim, there are two areas that immediately come to mind, and that is the marina area that potentially has a lot of good use that's not really being facilitated. I think there's an opportunity for a restaurant or two, and any other small, not encumbering commercial uses that could take place that the town could benefit from. Both the town as income, but also from its residents, and maybe even bringing in non-residential money, to facilitate that as well. The other area that I think about often is the Kings Highway section, is particularly as you're backing up closer and closer to the Rooster River, Ash Creek. And I find myself a couple times a week, I actually, along the Bridgeport side of Ash Creek, or Rooster River, is Mountain Grove Cemetery. And there's actually a walk path there that you can truly appreciate the beauty of that area as unfortunately, as polluted as it would be, it really could be an outstanding passive use, as well as helping mitigate the flood zone over there, which ultimately will help pay for the cleanup and creation of that passive use for recreation, because it would take potentially some of that land off the flood zone, if we can tighten up the flood map, because of the maybe a further dike system or just a way of minimizing that flood footprint. It would create a more valuable piece of land in that area, and as well as commercial. I mean, there's that section along the Kings Highway, but then it pushes into residential. So it just seems like it's kind of low-hanging fruit right there. And it is an environmental item that would probably gain a lot of traction, because people would love to know how everything was cleaned up.
Yep.
You see all the plastic there, you think to yourself, wow, that would be weeks of effort, but boy, wouldn't that be something to get that all clean and maybe create some type of partnership with the city of Bridgeport and Mountain Grove. So that was my thought on those items, but please, anyone else would like to share anything?
I think that was very astute, Kevin, because the problems we always run into is downtown, it's traffic, it's parking, It's density down there, but there's the anchor of all the restaurants and it's a destination. So people get to downtown and all the the space that we have for developing is at the Bridgeport end of town, whether it's the Metro Center, which, you know, it was great news that it looks like shovel's gonna hit the ground soon there, but there really isn't an anchor or a destination to bring people here other than one-off trips. It's getting there. I mean, we'll have the Sally soon. I think having that hotel there will help, but it is trying to even out the density of where people are. And then there's just so much more land available for development. From that, you know, from downtown all the way over to Bridgeport along the post road there and Kings Highway, as you said.
Anyone else?
Second everything you said, but we've talked about the
Yes.
the marina restaurants, we've been.
Yeah.
Well, that was a strategy that I'm sure you guys are aware was identified in the strategic planning process too, is the strategic plan, committee, had that highlighted as one of their opportunities that's out there is to get some sort of public-private partnership, in that area to do exactly as you had, mentioned, Kevin.
A question on the X side. Obviously, ideally, we want to have it mixed use, but what about the idea of it just being 100% commercial office space in terms of like some sort of a New York company coming out here with a headquarters or some subsidiary coming out here and setting?
Well,
there.
I think people would fall over with joy if that were the case. I think that the landowner, the developer, the issue that we've seen obviously playing out the last 10, 15 years at the Metro Center site is just the reality that there's so much available existing space elsewhere at a lesser rental price than would need to be charged for new construction, that it just hasn't created that market. There's been such a collapse in the demand for office space that while I think we all agree that would be an ideal scenario, I think the economic reality is there really isn't a market for that to take place because the cost of new construction would create a rental price higher than what you could get in Class A space in Stanford or Shelton or elsewhere. So,
I guess my thinking is.
I mean, I agree with you, that would be an ideal scenario.
Well, this is like dovetails in with the fact that we have two great universities in town. Tremendous amount of talent graduating every year.
Yep.
And those kids have to go somewhere, God willing, to a job, hopefully. And it's like, why can't we become the Silicon Valley of, and we have, I'm not saying necessarily that they have a technology department that's, you know, equal to what's going on out there in Berkeley.
Ding,
But-
ding, ding.
Yeah, right.
But,
That's one issue.
but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it could be some other area, but in terms of working with those universities, you know, attracting some sort of corporate, connection. Obviously, the universities are expanding on their own tremendously
Right.
internally.
Right.
That doesn't financially benefit the town in a whole.
Unfortunately, the trend right now is they're actually converting office space into residential. You know, there are places that are trying to do that.
Yeah.
You know, just another thought too is that it also has always occurred to me that Black Rock Turnpike is the meeting point between Fairfield University and Sacred Heart of sorts for our commercial aspect. And the town, the town doesn't really have the opportunity to benefit from it as much as each of the universities and points of development. I should say the private developers don't have as much opportunity. But that seems to be an area that hasn't really ever been developed for the concept of student. Wouldn't it be kind of interesting to have mixed-use development on Black Rock Turnpike to get some residential above the commercial, and with the idea of potentially drawing in university students? Wouldn't it be kind of cool for them to be able to walk downstairs and have everything right there at their fingertips? The other point is it could also verge into 55 and older, you know, retirement for people that want to downsize.
The
Well,
issue with Black Rock Turnpike typically is, that we're in the process of looking at that because it's very auto dependent right now. So it doesn't provide quite the same, allure that the downtown does in terms of providing that mixed use development opportunity where people can walk around. So there is that, part of the planning study that we went through, the transportation improvements that we're looking at was to make that a more pedestrian safe corridor.
Right.
To make some of those improvements so that we're balancing other options in
Yes.
terms of transit modes.
Yes.
So I do think there is an opportunity to do some, or look at some mixed-use development opportunities there.
Right.
I don't know, Jim?
I think I would agree at least that if Black Rock Turnpike were a blank canvas and all of that development were happening now, that we would have it much closer to the street rather than these big parking lots in front, have the development up closer that could help create that more downtown feel. That, you know, the big difference between downtown and Black Rock Turnpike, there might be the same amount of retail space, or even more on Black Rock Turnpike, but downtown, all the buildings are close to the sidewalk, creates a nice feel for walking, whereas you're not tempted to, you know, if you're up at ShopRite and you wanna go to A&S, you're probably getting in your car and moving rather than taking that walk that would be an easy stroll downtown, but you're not likely to do on Black Rock Turnpike, so.
It does occur to me, though, that each of those, many of those properties, they have like purposely fenced them off, so there's no flow between each of the properties. It's almost like if you start by taking down fences and then creating internal.
Agree 100%. We've been fighting, you know, that over the years. We have tried to incentivize interconnections between properties by not penalizing the parking that might be lost in doing that. We've had some limited success on the north side of Black Rock Turnpike, where you could now go from CVS all the way behind.
Yes.
You know,
To Stilson, all the way to.
all the way out to Stilson there, where there's opportunities to do more of that. I would agree.
That property in particular, that just seems to me that could become another promenade, another brick walk promenade from the People's Bank all the way over to Stilson. You can create another internal, and potentially even put a parking garage in that back section to be able to really develop, to harness the development of the space. There are multiple owners there, I think, so, but it would really be something worth looking at. It could really be a center point to Black Rock Turnpike.
Matt had, I see.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matt, please go ahead.
Thanks, guys. Jim, nice of you to be here. My name's Matt Rappaport. Just two thoughts. One, I don't know if this is too far from its current use, but that stretch of Park Avenue where Sacred Heart has really developed a lot, just driving through there, it feels like it's almost perfectly set up to be a mixed use area where you could have coffee shops and, you know, all kinds of amenities that students might use, and totally consistent with the look that Sacred Heart has kind of moved towards with the brick and super wide there, lots of room for walking. I don't know if anyone's ever looked at that or if it's just too much of a non-starter with all the residential. And then one other area that this one's super specific, but just I've always fantasized about a restaurant being in that on Harbor Road in Southport, that big real Sotheby's office. I think that seems like, if you could ever get it done, an amazing place for a restaurant. And, you know, I think there's already residential above it, but that area has potential if you could ever get past the neighbors.
Yeah, I don't disagree. You drive by, I agree with you that it just looks like an ideal place to have a restaurant if you can figure out the parking situation. One of the things, maybe not so much on Park Avenue, because once you get beyond the universities, if you're on at least the Fairfield side of Park Avenue, then you're at Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course. But part of our discussion, we did get some positive feedback with the idea of a commercial node in that part of town, because you know, especially now that the IGA that was on the corner of Stratfield and Fairfield Woods is now a different use. There's no place, as you say, to get convenience items, especially for the students. So we have floated the idea of a kind of a some sort of neighborhood commercial node up in that end of town, if not on Park Ave, maybe on Easton Turnpike, somewhere to help service that community up there. And I know Fairfield University has kind of been quietly buying up residential properties that are adjacent to them, and I think Sacred Heart may have a similar strategy. If they could amass enough area, I think there'd be an opportunity to create a small convenience, commercial district up in that part of town.
Wasn't there some discussion about the front of the former GE property to become a commercial use?
Yeah, we talked about that because when GE was operating, if you drive that section of Easton Turnpike, there's kind of two pullouts that Greater Bridgewater Transit used because they had a bus service to service the headquarters there and for buses to be able to turn around. So that's potentially an opportunity to create a small commercial node there to help service those students. We've also been pestering Sacred Heart that we think the time is right now for them to extend the sidewalk all the way down Jefferson Street. It didn't become a condition of approval for their hockey rink, but the more we heard from the public there, we've been pestering them, and they've been working their way down Jefferson Street with infrastructure improvements. Because if they got kids, they've got a pretty robust shuttle system, but if they could get a sidewalk on that, we're encouraging them to make the investment, and they agree. Ultimately, it's got some topographic challenges, but to extend that sidewalk all the way down that side of Jefferson Street,
Connecting their two campuses.
Yeah.
But if you've been up if you've had the opportunity to go into the what they call the West Campus facility, they have quite an impressive array of services for the students up there, right there in that building, in terms of small food court and convenience shop and coffee, and it's really quite impressive what they've done with that space.
Don had a comment. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, Don, please. Yeah, of course.
Don, you want to unmute and ask your question or make your comment?
Well, my question was, over the last few years, there's been plenty of studies, the upper and lower parts of Black Rock Turnpike, Commerce Drive area, Metro Center area, that's kind of the whole BJ's on both sides of the street. And some were pretty well developed in terms of laying out, here's the sort of buildings and that would go in there. My question for Jim is that how much of that do you plan to share with new consultants? And because it seems like a lot of thought went into some of those projects.
Well, that's a good question. Appreciate the question, Don. They have all that material. They have spent, before we even had our first discussion, our consulting team spent better part of 2 months digging into previous work that's been done, because, we're not starting from, as you say, we're not starting from scratch here, and that's an excellent comment. That we're building on work that's already been done by this board, by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and others. There's a lot of, and I could have brought the PowerPoint that we walked through with the Planning and Zoning Commission when we introduced them to this planning team, and there was a slide that had probably at least 15 previous plans that they have studied and looked at. And looked at those even before they responded to the RFP. I believe they did some of that homework where they were well positioned to immediately be on the same page as we were in terms of what the big issues are that we need to talk about. So I would agree that we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about redesigning or rethinking what we think, because we've already implemented new zoning regulations and have some recommendations regarding, the Commerce Drive Metro Center area. So we're not going to re-plow that field, so to speak. We want to look at where other areas of town, downtown, what's right for downtown. I think there's a lot of tension between, you know, new investment and what that might mean for some of the things that were said about parking and traffic infrastructure, and what's the right mix. And so they have short response. They have all that material. They've studied it and are well familiar with the work that's been done prior to this effort.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
I have just a curious question. You know, the shopping center there with Marshalls, CVS.
Yep.
On the far end of that, there's this whole parking lot space beyond, like, just trucks parked there, or there's some sort of store going on there on the end of that.
The old McClinch
far end of
property?
that parking lot.
Oh, the old
Yeah, there's
McClinch
McClinch
piece
property.
beyond that?
Yeah, what's that all about there?
Well, I don't know exactly what's taking place, but McClinch, had, for years, they had they were on the old
Mhm.
Fairfield lumber site
Mhm.
with all their rental equipment.
United Rental,
They've
right?
sold out to United Rental. They may be leasing that space for people to park commercial,
They have, yeah. But it's a
vehicles.
development opportunity, for
That's
sure.
what I thought.
Yeah.
Wow, look at that
Plus,
space.
I think it's a larger question, which we're actually working with Jim and Emmeline to look at our parking regulations as it relates to some of these larger commercial retail centers. You know,
Mhm.
for example, the Fairfield Center Shopping Plaza where Bob's Stores
Mhm.
is located, it's an island, a sea of asphalt, really. So, you know, perhaps there's opportunities for us to reexamine our parking requirements and determine whether or not, at a certain point, we're just adding parking for the sake of parking, that it doesn't really add any additional value to the community. Perhaps it would be better either recaptured as open space or provides for additional development opportunities in some of these larger multi-tenant retail plazas
Mhm.
like that. Certainly the former Kohl's Plaza where Aldi's store and Floor & Decor is located now. There's auxiliary parking next door that's rarely used except maybe to park a few tractor trailer trucks there.
Right.
The Stop and Shop plaza, or the plaza you're referring to with the CVS and Marshalls and DSW. Most of those, you know, just based on observation, would indicate that we have more than adequate parking, in fact, a surplus of parking spaces, and maybe, you know, there's an opportunity for us to examine our parking regulations and see if we can reduce them somewhat.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I failed to include in my remarks that in addition to the upgrade to the POCD,
Mhm.
part of this effort, we are actually also reexamining our zoning regulations, and this same consulting team has been tasked to, it's kind of a two-phase, where as we talk about the initial POCD strategies, they are looking at our current regulations, and we're looking to reformat them, make them more user-friendly, more modern, tables, searchable, and so forth. But the next phase, after our land use policy update is done, we're hoping then to do a little bit deeper dive into the regulations to actually implement the regulatory changes that are going to be needed to implement the policies, the land use policies that we're putting forward. So as Mark said, hey, is there an opportunity to shrink rethink what we demand for parking, rethink what we're requiring for height and stories and so forth. And so all of this, and I can't emphasize enough that we view this board as an important partner, because the Planning and Zoning Commission, you know, they need feedback. You know, they're elected folks, and they like to know that what kind of strategies we might be floating out there to see if there's an appetite to implement, whether we're on the right track or not. And if you folks think those are ideas that you can embrace, and I know recently, you know, the letters that we get through Mark when there are pending applications or issues pending, where you guys take a position one way or the other on those is critical feedback for the commission to get in terms of them weighing you know, because there's always a lot of, I hesitate to use the word noise, but I can't think of a better word at the moment. But when an issue's out there at a public hearing, a lot of the real issues kind of get lost in the hyperbole. And that's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of public discourse, and that's fine. But to get, you know, decision makers like to have feedback that they know they're not on an island in their idea. If it's a good idea, if you think it's a good idea, they'd love to hear that. If they think it's a bad idea and we should be thinking going in a different direction, that's equally important. So your participation going forward in this effort is going to be very important to the commission. And as I said earlier, if we can structure our public engagement such to test the waters on a particular goal or issue that you think is important to this board, we'd love to hear it.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you.
Anything else, guys? All right, we'll let Jim get to.
I was gonna say, go back to.
I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning, and will certainly not be the last time we have this discussion, and we look forward to your continued participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
So a couple things, as Jim alluded to, one of the things that we did opine was with respect to the proposed text amendment for the development at 15 Umpqua and proposed changes to our zoning regulations to allow for a higher density residential development with housing opportunity zone. I talked to a few of the a few of the Planning and Zoning Commission members who were very appreciative of the fact that the commission submitted some comments with respect to that proposed change to our zoning regs. And so, you know, the hearing has been continued once more. So they were on hearing night number 3 coming up, which was continued until the 26th of this month. So I'm not sure, based on the progress that's been made over the first 2 hearing nights, that we necessarily will conclude matters on the 26th, but hope springs eternal, I suppose. But it has been a very contentious process, as you can imagine, based on the application that's being presented. So that's where things stand on that particular development. I did also want to flag for your attention, there's a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting next Tuesday, the 12th, at which time the commission will consider a compliance application for 801 Post Row, which is the Pizza Co., proposed Pizza Co. restaurant that we had supported their application some time ago. You may recall that the commission had issued a conditional approval, required a revised site plan that took some time to make those changes, longer than we had hoped. But they've made those changes now and have submitted a revised site plan for the commission's review and hopefully approval on the 12th, which will be helpful in terms of cleaning up that portion, that corner lot on the Post Road. Mm-hmm. On the other side of the street, I have continued to have conversations with the ownership for the former Joe's American site. Mm-hmm. They're entertaining now other restaurant uses for that location, aside from the Chick-fil-A, which was not approved by the commission. I did attend the Blight Committee meeting, and as a result of that last meeting, they issued a summons to the ownership to appear at their next meeting later this month. And I believe they meet the 3rd Monday, so that's coming up soon. I did talk to the owner and advise them of what is to be expected, what we are expecting in terms of making some improvements to the site so it doesn't look quite so blighted. And it is their intent to make those facade improvements, which would further their objective in terms of securing a tenant too. So planning to do that. I don't have a definitive time schedule. I think, you know, we're continuing to push that along through the Blight Committee too, which will help, hopefully sharpen the focus of folks and get them, you know, mindful of their responsibilities to keep up their property.
Mark, are they planning on using that building now?
Yes.
They are.
They are.
So they're just staying with the same footprint.
They're staying with the same footprint. You know, they've entertained a lot of different uses, continue to get, offers from other folks, looking at a multitude of uses, anything from higher density residential to mixed use to hotels to, you know, so a variety of things, some of which, you know, frankly, you know, would probably better yield, for the town and its tax base than the existing building. But, you know, recognizing that it is a permitted use, so, and they certainly they own the property, so they have certain rights and responsibilities that go with that. So, I mean, some of the uses that they're talking about in terms of, you know, just a restaurant use would be okay. Doesn't move the needle from an economic development perspective as much, but at this point, we'd certainly like to see the property cleaned up and put back into productive use.
Are there any incentives out there that we can put in their direction to?
Yeah, the most powerful incentive, well, there will be a compelling disincentive if they continue to not to make improvements to their property. They'll be under citation and there'll be fines associated
Oh,
with
really?
that. But in
Yeah.
terms of development, I don't think there is anything more that we can offer. I mean,
Right.
you would, typically people that are owning this are looking for the highest and best use, the best return on their
Right.
investment. So I don't know that we can move the needle in their calculations of what's the best use for the property. If they're not seeing that potential, I don't know there's anything we can do to help.
I'm just astonished. It's a
Educate.
beautiful piece of property.
I know.
It is.
You'd think
It
they'd
is.
really take advantage.
I think
Yeah.
it's a bit short-sighted, but again, our immediate concern right now is doing something to make it look less horrible than it currently does.
Who, you know, I'm sure they're financially savvy people, but maybe it would be advantageous to send a commercial banker out.
They're pretty savvy people, so. Yeah, I think they've looked at it, and, you know, again, I'll be happy to talk to Phil. You know, the question, and I've continued to talk to them, I guess the question perhaps in their mind is, you know, it obviously has been used for a fast casual restaurant, that would be an easy, you know,
Just transition.
perfectly consistent, compliant, application, you know, no fuss, no muss, that type of thing, but, perhaps, you know, given their experience with you know, that is perhaps the one thing that we could do, which is maybe allay, concerns that they have, that if they were proposing a different use for the site, that would be a protracted, you know, process, to secure the necessary approvals from the town. I can understand where they might have some reluctance to go through that process again, given their experience with Chick-fil-A. So, you know, that, to your point, that might be something we could talk about. But then again, you know, we had conversations leading into the Chick-fil-A application too. So, you know, we may not have the most credibility here or be able to control all the levers that would arrive at a favorable decision.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could show them as an example of leading them through in a very quick fashion of their application and acceptance of a mixed use, and then want that in front of Umpqua, and then show Umpqua you can go it easy or you can go it hard.
Well, I mean, the good example, illustration of that process where it does work well is at Fairfield Metro, where the commission, and it wasn't a quick process, but the commission went through a planning process, arrived at a plan and proposed regulatory changes, which provided a kind of a guide to any developer coming in. They made an application that was consistent with the plan's recommendations, with the necessary changes, and it was unanimously approved in one hearing night. So where it does, you know, where you have gone through the process of bringing both the commission and the public on board and creating a plan for the city, and then you have a succeeding application to implement that, it can work very well. We just don't have that here,
Yeah.
so, that would be the only issue.
What's the relationship with the barber shop next door?
They own that piece too,
Yeah.
and at this point, it looks like they're just gonna knock that building down and use it for additional, parking or open space for the site, so,
Huh.
yeah. Again, it's perfectly reasonable, I guess, certainly consistent with the prior use and occupancy of the site. Just, not the sexiest, and certainly I would argue it's the highest and best use for the property. But again, I think maybe their thinking may have changed given the bruising fight that they went through with Chick-fil-A, so.
Okay. Any,
The other thing is I will mention is, we have, circulated, and placed at a couple locations in town, working with the, restaurateurs, the outdoor dining petition. We've got a number of signatures already. We have them at Centros, The Stand, and Banda, among others. So we are gathering signatures in support of our, petition to amend our regulations, and we're hoping to make that revised application this fall. We are working with the Chamber of Commerce to have hold our annual sidewalk sale event on the 16th of July. Mary Alice from my office has been working very diligently on that. We hope to have the revised plans and drawings to the DOT for their encroachment permit review for the Stratfield streetscape improvements this Friday. We've gone through several design submissions and reviews and comments, and hopefully this is the final effort, and we're hoping to put that out to bid later this month. And then, as you know, we did, the Accurate Builders and Developers did close on the property at Fairfield Metro, the crossings at Fairfield Metro. Been working with them to secure their permits to start construction or pull permits for the first building, a residential building, I think 70 units there as part of their initial phase of development, and they intend to start, they're pulling their sewer permit this Friday, which will come with it a $500,000 check. So that's what it will cost them just for the sewer permit alone. So, so we'll continue to press forward on that. I will mention we are in conversations with a prospective developer for the Reiner Estate property at 81 Black Rock Turnpike next to the train station. We've facilitated a conversation between Ted Reiner, who owns the property, and a local development company that's interested in developing the site. And then next door, we're continuing to work with both the owner of 111 Black Rock Turnpike, where Planet Fitness is currently located. They're relocating to the Stop and Shop Plaza, but we have a brewery restaurant operator that's taking that space. We're planning to take that space, and we did get a variance for parking from ZBA. So thank you for all your support, and we're working now with the state DOT to secure a license agreement so they can use some of the overflow parking at Fairfield Metro. So, been a busy month. We also, that's the same ownership group for 111 Black Rock Turnpike that owns the Exide property and the Hyundai dealership. And we've been in conversations, and they've provided some conceptual site plans for the Exide parcel, which is a mixed-use development. We need to make some changes to it. So we've provided some initial feedback on their conceptual plans, but, they seem to be heading in the right direction for sure. With that, I'll pause and take any questions members may have.
You're getting feedback at all about our economic conditions in terms of retail being somewhat tenuous at this point, or at least in the near future, the way things are going in the economy and inflation and so forth?
Well, we're not as exposed as perhaps some other communities, and I think what we have to offer here has pluses and minuses. We still have a good mix of independent retailers that provide, kind of a unique shopping experience that, you can only get in person.
Mhm.
And really that has to be what differentiates themselves in a crowded market, a very competitive marketplace. We're obviously battling not only national retailer, chains, but also online, shopping. So you really can't, some of these folks are not choosing, and I wouldn't, suggest they try to compete on price,
Hmm.
but really in terms of providing an experience, providing, the in-person, which people still do crave. I mean, so I think that has helped mitigate the impact. We're not a shopping mall. We don't have shopping malls. So, I mean, if I were a community with a large shopping mall, I might be a bit more concerned, about that. But, and we've got a lot of restaurants that have bled into our retail districts, which again is something, you can't consume food, from Amazon yet, that, in terms of a meal, satisfying meal experience. So I do think, the one thing that I've heard is that we're a victim of our own success to some degree, where you have rising, costs, of land, which, obviously goes into the valuation of the real estate, which goes into your triple net calculation of what your taxes are being paid on top of, with demand, and limited supply, prices go up. So, retail, downtown in the core business district, people are renting spaces for $50 a square foot plus triple net. At some point you wonder how sustainable that path is.
Right.
So that to me is the bigger concern, as opposed to, at one point you have some hollowing out of it's a tough industry to be in, retail, restaurants, but, I do think, we have a fairly modest retail presence compared to some, and it's a different retail experience as compared to, I just visited my mom in Pennsylvania, and you could be virtually anywhere going down their commercial strip. It's the same succession of stores and restaurants and chains.
Right.
And you could be in Omaha, you could be in York, Pennsylvania, where I was.
Right, very true.
Here, it's truly, there is some of that, but it's all set by some very truly unique stores that are only here or only in a couple locations nearby. So I think that does set us apart, and it's a community that has been generally supportive too, in terms of, especially the restaurants. But, it is something I think we'd be mindful.
My personal observation is that, there's a lot of outside of town money that flows in here that will help insulate our town. I just see it. I know it in my own service. We get people from towns away, sometimes states away, coming back. So it's, and you see a lot of New York influence. You see people coming in from surrounding towns, and that is good. That's outside money coming in to pay our taxes, which is, that's a goal.
It's ideal situation.
It is. And there's always a certain percentage of attrition within any business of turnover. So it's just a matter of managing what that number is. Any other commentary? Any other business?
Yeah, I know Bev's not, able to join us today. I don't, those of you who were able to attend the dinner they had the other night, very nice, so.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
It was really a recognition of the town, not so much the individual.
But congratulations.
Yeah.
Mark was recognized for his efforts, rightfully so, along with, some other key individuals. I had the ticket and couldn't get out of the office, so, but congratulations on that. So, And so did Beverly maybe have anything else?
I think the only other thing that she's, working diligently on, which we're working with her, is that they have a Buy a Brick, a Commemorative Brick,
Yes.
campaign to
Yes.
recognize businesses and their contribution to the
Yes.
town as part of the Chamber's 75th anniversary, celebration. And that's part of our downtown streetscape, improvement, which we're hoping to undertake later this year. We're just finishing up our design plans in-house and then putting that out to bid. But there's the area around, in front of the library,
yeah.
where the bus stop is, where we're hoping to do a brick, campaign, working with. So if you haven't already, for your business, secured a brick, I'm sure they would be happy to talk to you about those opportunities.
I think the hardest part is to figure out what you want to put on the brick. Otherwise, they make it pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
That's
And with that, I don't have anything else. I think I really do appreciate Jim, making some time this morning.
Yes.
I think it's really an important topic for us. I think we had some good conversations, some observations, and things that the commission should look at. Maybe we can continue that conversation at our next meeting, and we put some other thoughts together for your review. But I think it really would be, we don't do these things very often, updates to our POCD once every 10 years, and the zoning regulation rewrite has not taken place in more than 3 decades. So, in addition to the parking requirements, we hear a lot from businesses in terms of the signage requirements. And so, other things that you may be aware of, we should put that on the table now, because we don't have these opportunities too often.
Right.
So, do appreciate everyone joining
Yes.
this morning.
Yes.
For those of you joining via Zoom, thank you.
Yes, yes. We do not have a meeting in August, correct?
I think we will not have a meeting in August, yes.
Okay, so we're gonna focus, into the, first Thursday of September. You know what that is?
The only thing that would cause that, if something comes up that requires your immediate action, we can
That's
talk
the
to
8th.
you.
September 8th.
But our
Good.
next meeting would then be the 8th.
Good,
Yeah.
okay, excellent, very, very good.
All
All
right?
right, commissioners, have a great rest of the summer. Thank you for being here today. Mark, again, thank you. Gretchen, thank you. And just as a final note, wasn't it really nice of Jim to say, how much he appreciates our feedback?
Yeah.
And that's a really nice commentary to us, and to our efforts. So with that said, take care, everyone. Thank you.
See you guys. We're adjourned at,
Have a good summer, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.